gave a little talk about infographics, the history of infographics, why they are. Was anyone here last year on my talk on infographics? No. Okay. Today is not about what infographics are, how to write and collect the correct data. All of these things are topics that are massive, and we would need to spend a workshop on each one. So the whole buzzword of infographics has been, around for the last 5 years or so, and it's become, well, it's been around much longer than that, but that's when suddenly every time you open your inbox you see an infographic, right? And more on Pinterest, and they're being shared, and they can be a really amazing marketing tool, or they can go completely wrong. There's a lot of debate whether infographics are still, whether infographics are even necessary, or whether there's too much of them out there, because it's been such an explosion, and every day there's more of them, like multiplying all over. Whether infographics are coming to an end of their era, but I don't think that's the case, just because for these pure, simple facts that you see on the screen here, and that's the fact that we are visual creatures. We're becoming more and more visual by the day, in terms of our attention span is shrinking. It's very sad, but it's true. We don't read anymore. We don't. The first paragraph of an email is just about as much as most of us can handle before our mind goes and trails off. And infographics is a way of capturing your audience. It's a way of grabbing people's attention, because we are visual and we respond to visual data. So this is quite actually a little sliver from an infographic that I think does the trick in terms of being very nicely laid out and clean and crisp. Now, because there's such a demand for infographics, sorry, I was running to get in here and set it all up. Because there's such a demand on infographics nowadays, every company has this pressure to create them. And what you end up seeing is stuff like this, which is an in-house person who has no idea about design being told to put an infographic together, and then you end up seeing clip art and conflicting types of images. The hand up there is the only thing that has shadows in it, whereas everything else is like flat. To me, this is a nice wireframe. If a designer came to me and said, this is the concept of how I want to lay out my infographic, I'd be like, okay, that's a nice start. Now let's continue thinking. But obviously, it isn't an infographic that will make any kind of impact. Then, and again, this is another example of, funnily enough, it's a company advertising themselves as infographic makers. But, it's just, it's not exactly going to make you want to really read and understand what they're trying to say, these kind of graphics. And there's more. I'm just showing you a few of the things that I've seen that I've been emailed, and I chose charities just as one example, because just as a sector, because every sector is different, so just showing you different charity and non-profit infographics, and medical ones too. I mean, here, this is pretty much taken from Excel. Every single color is different. It's very unclear what the data is trying to tell you, and you have to really read all that blurb on the side to understand what's going on. Bar charts and pie charts are huge parts of your infographics, including and also icons. And what you really want to do is grab people's attention with that. So I'm going to show you later a nice way to create pie charts and some tips and tricks to take it further. Here is an example of, it's not bad. It's better than the others that I've shown you, I think. But one thing to stay away from is, you see the little men up there have rounded shoulders and rounded legs, and the ones down here have square shoulders. Don't mix your icons. If you're going to go and purchase ready designed icons, if you're not going to draw them from scratch, at least go and collect icons that look similar, right? So that you have a reference library. And it's not a good idea to mix different styles. So if you're using drop shadows, then always use drop shadows. If you're using color, then keep to that same color scheme. Don't have different types of styles, from hand-drawn look to crisp graphic look, together in the same infographic. And here's an example. It's not terrible, but in terms of the pie charts, this is pretty much taken straight from Excel, that kind of pie chart. And that is a shame, because everything else in here, there's quite nice elements in here in terms of the visuals, but then there's no need for these type of pie charts anymore. We can make them look better, and that's what I want to show you next. But then, going back from these, which are quite bland or a bit amateurish, the other problem, so that's one problem that we're faced with. We're seeing so many infographics that are too basic, too boring, too bland. But then we also see the ones that are just so overwhelming that you don't know where to look. And but please, if you like them, or if someone was involved or in the design, don't take this personally. I mean, it's just, I'm not saying this is terrible. I'm just saying there's an overstimulation going on visually with a lot of the designs we see out there. And you want to keep it crisp and clean, and kind of find the balance between that and that, or that. I mean, if you look here, there's so many nice thoughts going on in here. In fact, I kind of like the bar chart, and I want you to think about bar charts, because there's no need for your basic bar charts anymore. You don't need a legend, you don't need a value axis and all of that stuff anymore and little tick marks. You can put the numbers into the bar chart or above the bar chart. You can put little icons to make them more relevant. Color, there's so many ways of making bar charts pop to stay away from just a bar chart. And there's some that are beautifully designed in terms of this person really knows Illustrator inside out, but again, visually overstimulating, and it would need a lot of time and patience to look at them. This might be an amazing example of artistry, but if you're looking at the corporate approach to infographics, and most of us are, I think, work in the corporate world, we need to present data in a quick and easy, clean and crisp way. Some of these might go too far visually. So from a visual perspective, I would say, and again, this is not the holy grail of infographics in terms of that's the only way to do it, but the corporate approach to infographics is to keep the message clean and crisp, not to have too few colors. If you only have your company color, let's say your blue brand color, then it'll look really, really bland and boring. But if you have too many colors, people will bounce all over the place and not be able to discern your message. So here's a nice example in terms of how this is structured. The pie charts are really lovely, and they're using graphics. The graphics are consistent. You see what I mean by that? They're all drawn in the same style. So whether they were drawn by hand or whether they were taken from a library, at least they were taken from the same source. And there's a consistency here in the message and in the way it's conveyed, and a clean beginning and end, and a flow through the pages. And that's what all of these, and I'm not going to spend too much time now on each of these, but just they all have that in common. They have interesting use, simple use of graphics, and interesting color schemes, but not too much, just so that there is a clean, crisp way of reading the data and understanding the data. Here's another example of what I think is a really nice bar chart in terms of how it deals with completely getting rid of the value axis, the legend, and putting the data inside the bar, because there's so much room inside the bar for text, right? So I would never ever have the value axis near the bar chart anymore in an infographic. It's just not necessary. And one more here, and we will talk about how to create that style over there, where you see the percentages in like a curved line, and the higher the percentage, the longer the line is. We will use brushes to accomplish that. And afterwards, we will have a bit of a look at some of the stuff done in Information is Beautiful. Information is Beautiful is a really lovely website and a few books. The guy has published a few books, David McCandless. And it's nice to look at his website for updated infographics. They're very inspirational, they're very creative. So they're completely going away from what I just showed you, because they're going all out there in terms of creativity. But there's a lot there of inspiration to be found. And I want to show you later how to create some of these types of graphics in Illustrator, and you can then take that and maybe pull it back to make it a bit more simple for your infographics, for your corporate infographics. Okay, so the first thing I want to start with in Illustrator is revamping your pie chart. This is a pie chart that was taken straight from Excel. I just copy and pasted it in here just to have something to look at, and the data is here on the side. And I'm going to start off with the basic pie chart tool. Now, interestingly enough, I was just at a demo, a preview demo. Was anyone there from Adobe? And I've been moaning, and we all have been, for years that these tools have not improved since the dawn of Illustrator. And now they're doing a lot to make a change. So in 12 months' time, who knows what I'm going to demo with these tools. But for now, let's just use the old standard pie graph tool, which literally has been around for I don't know how many years, but first time I've used Illustrator, it was there. So what you do is you draw your graphic, you draw a circle of where the area should go, and in you can pop your data. Now, let me just cancel this, sorry. One little piece of thing that I would recommend is, hang on, is don't worry so much. I mean, in these visual representations, I'm not going to worry about the descriptive terms of the percentages. I'm going to write them in separately afterwards. So you see here this pie chart that I've made quickly about bananas, pears, and apples. If you do that, if you do it using the pie chart tool, then you're going to, if you look here, object, graph, data, you can see the data of this, apples, pears, you see in the numeric values. You will then have to deal with that area here, and it's really difficult because it's all grouped together and moving things around. Yeah, if you played with this tool before, it's really hard to separate things. And the moment you ungroup, the artwork is no longer, the data is no longer accessible. So that's one of the biggest problems with the graph tools in Illustrator, is that there's very little flexibility. So what I will do with this demo, I'm just going to take the numbers here, 24.9, 14, the percentages from this graphic up here. So I've literally typed up the percentages, and I will type in the text later. I won't do that. I won't demo that because that's boring. I'm just going to, but just for now, you see, I've got it here, the text. It's tabbed text. You can copy paste it in from Excel, from a Word document, just as long as it has tabs in between the numbers. I'm going to copy it. Go back to the pie chart, click and drag an area where the pie chart will go, and then I'm going to go and paste. And in comes the data, click the little check mark, and there you go, you can see what's happened. Okay, now, the first thing, obviously, it always gives it to you in these absolutely boring shades of black and gray and white and so on. So the first thing that I think for any infographic designer is to build up a nice library of color references. And I'm going to show you, those of you who don't know, the color guide palette under the window menu, color guide, which is a great way to create a nice color theme if you are not very good with colors, if you haven't studied colors and don't know what goes together. Let's say your corporate color is blue. I'm going to use my direct selection tool, and I'm going to select the black little triangle here, and I'm going to choose a blue, or actually let's use a green. Let's use the green. This is the company color, and now I want to find other colors that work well with that. If you go and have that color selected, so it's in your foreground, go under the window menu and open up color guides, and this palette pops up. And what this palette does is it shows you the color that you've picked and a selection of colors that it thinks would work well with that. Now, how does it do it, or what does it base it on? It bases it on loads of different types of color, on color theory, and loads of different ways of mixing color, from complementary, which are colors opposite of each other on the color wheel, and split complementary. So that's quite an extreme color scheme because they're very stark contrast in the colors, or an analogous color scheme where the colors are next to each other on the color wheel, so they're very similar. And you can go and pick whichever one you like as a starting point, you see. And if you like it, save it over into your swatch palette. Here's my swatch palette open on the side. And if I click on that little button there, you see here on the bottom right of the color guide, boom, it goes and copies that whole folder of colors that I've chosen across into my color guide. And now with my direct selection tool, I'm going to go and apply these colors just by selecting. So far, this is a little bit, not very overly advanced yet, but there we go. We've got a nicely colored pie chart. And if you don't like the stroke, which is that color that goes all the way around the little pie pieces, then just go and take the stroke off and make it none. And that looks a lot more crisp and elegant. Now, what I was mentioning to you before is that this is still pretty much like the standard pie chart that we see in Excel, in terms of the fact that the inside is completely filled with like a full pie. But this is a perfect opportunity to write text or data or something inside. So a quick way to do it, to cheat, so to speak, would be to draw a circle on top and fill that with white to cover that area up. So if I select the ellipse tool, to find the center, the exact center of the pie, like just position your cursor and a little anchor point pops up. You see when I found a center point or another anchor point. And the circle tool, if you click drag normally, it just goes off from the top left or the top bottom right corner. So if you want to make sure that this center point is the actual, that you're drawing the circle from the center, hold down the Alt key as you're doing this, and you're drawing outwards, and then the Shift key to make sure it stays a perfect circle. And there you go. Okay. So that already looks a lot better, and you can make that a white fill if you wanted to, fake it. So this is fake. What I mean by fake is that this is not, it's not showing actually cutting a hole into it. It's only covered it up. It's much quicker and easier, and it means that the data is still intact. That's the whole reason I haven't actually sliced it. If I were to slice it, I would lose the access to the data, because to slice, I need to go and use the shape builder tool or the pathfinder tool. If I try to do it now, just to show you briefly, it won't do anything, you see, because I'm dealing with a grouped pie chart. So I would have to select the pie chart and go Object Ungroup in order to be able to literally not just cover it up with a white circle, but actually cut a hole into it. And if I do that now, Object Ungroup, I'm going to get that message, an error message, to say this is a graph, and if you now do this, you're losing the data. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. If, however, you want a background to show through, like a gradient or something, then you have no choice. You have to do the cutting. Before I do that, just one more thing about the color guide, because I mentioned the color guide and then I got kind of carried away with the other stuff. The cool thing about this color guide is that I've now used this color scheme here. But if your art director or whoever pops over your shoulder and says, you know what, I don't like the greens, I think we should have gone for a range of reds or purples or something like that, no problem, because with the color guide comes something else that's really, really cool. And that is that when you've got your color guide selected and you select your artwork, so I'm selecting my artwork from my selection tool, and I have the color guide palette up, and it shows me the colors that I've used before. I can go and click on the little button on the bottom left is the one that lets us save the color group, but one over to the left is the Edit or Apply Color. And when you click on that, it pops up this Recolor Artwork button window, and what it does is it shows you all the color groups that you've already saved, because I've saved a few earlier. And when I click on them, it randomly not randomly, it uses those colors to recolor. But I say random, you don't know which pie is going to get which color. So that's one of those things where you have to kind of leave it to guesswork. But you can, within seconds, create loads of different color themes for your whole design. You can do it to the entire page, not just to a pie chart. You can select the entire artwork and recolor it. And if you want to go even more creative, you can start off with one of your color schemes. And instead of choosing one of the color groups that you've already pre-saved here, you can go and click on you see there's the Assign button, but next to it is the Edit button. And when you click on the Edit button, this is a great way to learn about color theory, because it shows you your color wheel, and it shows you your base color, which is the green that I chose earlier, the main color, and I can drag it around, and in the background, my artwork gets recolored. I can drag it inwards to lighten, or less saturated, outwards to make it more saturated. If I like what I've done, I can then simply go and ask it to save that, because I might not want to lose those colors. So I can ask it to, up here, you see in the top right corner, top right corner, to say create a new color group, and it saves it for you. And now I have them both available, and all the others as well. Okay? So, and you can do this again and again and again. One thing I'd like you to think about, just again jumping, but it's important jumping, is start getting a little library together of your favorite graphics and so on, so that the next time you do this, it won't be such hard work anymore. So if you go and save a whole page of pie charts, then you just need to change the data the next time around, and you don't have to do all this starting work again that I've just done. So I've got a little file here just to show you what I mean. So this is one of my, font missing. Sorry, I've moved it from one computer to another. So the pink is not the way it's supposed to look, because that's just the wrong typeface. But anyway, but the rest of it you can see is, a little library of different icons that I might use a lot, such as a little people icons and a little location icon that I've created in advance, and other icons that I might need. So all I need to then do is copy and paste them across. Very good to have a world map. There's so many free vector files of world maps out there, and then you can just copy and paste it and recolor the different regions to have them for your infographic in the background. So start building up lots of libraries, and have also looked, there's also this new library, CSS library panel, where you can save library items and share them across your whole Creative Cloud. But I'm not going to go there now because we don't have time. Oh, where's my file? There we go. Okay, so going back to this, okay, As I said, now would be the time where I could go and type in a number. And if I go here back to, too bad that my font's missing. Hang on, let me just go and change the font to a different font. So the one thing to do with these is that change the percentage value to a smaller amount, to a smaller size, so that it doesn't take up so much room. Because percentages look so silly if you just leave them. Sorry, guys. Okay. See, if I just type in 75 and then percent, like the normal object and group. So if you just type in 75%, it takes up so much room in your artwork, and it just doesn't look nice. But the moment you take that and type it elsewhere, a small percentage symbol, and then just scale it right down, you know, like so. Well, that's a bit too small, but you see, and just put it up as a small little symbol like that. It looks so much better already, and it doesn't take up so much room. So develop a standard for how you display your numbers, your percentages. Create paragraph styles for yourselves in advance so that they're all ready to go when you are ready to create. So that way it all saves time, and then you can go and put that into the center of your pie chart with a little blurb about what you want to say, what the message is, and so on. Okay. Now, for the next bit, I want to make this 3D, so I do have to cut a hole. But because I don't want to lose the data, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep a copy of the original and alt-drag across like that copy, so that if I ever do need to go back and change the data by going under Object, Graph, Data, I can go and do that. I can go and change the numbers, and everything will remain as was. But for now, I'm going to actually make this into artwork that has literally a hole in it, because then I want to make it into a bit of a 3D effect. Before you do that, make sure that the circle is the right size. So from a design perspective, how thin do you want it to be, you know, or how that little ring, or how fat do you want it to be? So obviously you can go and, you know, play around with the sizings as much as you want. But once I go and ungroup, Object, Ungroup, it warns me again that if this is no longer going to be a pie chart, I can no longer get to the data. So if I now go Object, Graph, you see it's not, there's nothing there. I've lost that ability. So thank goodness I always keep the original, always keep the original somewhere safe, otherwise a nightmare. I'm going to use the shape builder for this, just to cut out a hole. You know what, I'm going to make this a different color so you see what I mean, because otherwise you'll just be staring at white and it won't look different. So I'm going to select the artwork and the circle on top. I'm going to select the shape builder, click on the shape builder tool, and the shape builder tool, the way it works is that anything that you click and drag across with your mouse or with your digital pen becomes selected and becomes merged. I don't want to do that. I might want to do that for something else, but not in this case. I want to cut the circle in the middle out. So I need to change it from the fact that it's adding to wanting it to subtract. And the way to do that is simply hold down the Alt key on your keyboard, and now the shape builder, it used to have a plus, now it has a minus. And in CC, the shape builder is finally curved, so I can just draw a little circle, and you see everything it touches becomes selected and cut out. This is now literally a cut out ring, and I can prove that, you see, because it's what's behind it is see-through. So I can now no longer change the data or change the pie sizes, but I can still recolor this if I wanted to. And now with that cut out, I'm going to go and make it 3D, all right? The 3D features are really nice in Illustrator because they're always editable and changeable, and you can save them as a graphic style. So again, for our future library of resources, this is great. What you do is you select your pie chart, you go under the Effect menu, and you go under, where are we? Stylize? No, sorry, 3D. 3D, it's right there in front of me. And Extrude and Bevel. And you can go and play around with this. It's really nice because the little drawing of the cube shows you what to expect. Always check on the preview button so you can see. And you can literally drag that cube around, and it shows you your pie chart at totally different angles. So you can go nuts with this and make it really, really creative. But I've already figured out the numbers that I want for this, and I've written them in my little instructions up there. After playing around with it a bit, I've decided that this is the right way to go for me. It's just about which rotation, which axis. So that's the different angles that you can type in up here, and for the rotation. And then you've got the extrude depth, which is how deep the drawing is. So you can go crazy and make it into this, like, you know, proper 3D shape, but that doesn't look very nice. I think for pie charts, you want to be subtle. You can do it like that. That's quite nice and elegant. Or you can go a little bit more, like, you know, I would say 20 points or something like that. There's no rules here, but you know, we don't want to overdo it either. Actually, 30. Let me do 30. The shading effect that you want is either diffuse shading or plastic shading. Wireframe would just give you a wireframe. That doesn't work very well. And no shading just gives you flat. There's no, you know, shading and no 3D look. So diffuse and plastic are really good. And what's nice about this is if I now go and click OK, I can still recolor my artwork. I can still do the trick that I showed you earlier by going under Edit and Apply Color and reapply the a totally different color scheme. Ooh, let's just, you see? And it retains the shading. If I now want to go back and edit it completely, like change the extrude level and or change the angle of the rotation, etc., no problem. I need to go back into the 3D effect. But here's a common mistake that people make. People very often, when they want to edit an effect, go back on the effect, go back in 3D, and go back to the menu. You'll get an error message because this is not the way to do it. This will add a second effect on top of the shape. The place to manage it is under the window menu, the appearance palette, which is very much undervalued and underused, I think. The appearance palette lists any effect that you've given to your shape. And so you can have as many effects as you want on top of each other, like a drop shadow and a roughened and a 3D effect and a warp, all on top of each other. And they're all listed here. And you can hide and show these effects. And if you want to edit the effect, you just click on it again and up pops the window. Make sure the preview button is turned on because for some reason it turns itself off. And then you can go and make the extrusion, like the depth deeper, or you know, change whatever you want. By the way, you can change the shading effect. There's more to it. If you go to plastic shading, you can go to more options and decide how strong the shading should be by increasing the intensity of the highlights and the shadows up here. The ambient light makes a huge difference to how it looks, you see. Another thing that you might want to change, do you see how it's a little bit like jagged, the transitions between the colors? It doesn't look very smooth. I don't know if you can see what I mean here on the shadow. That's because of the blend steps that it puts in. It has put in 25 steps to create that shading effect. So you can increase that. Do be careful because it does require more rendering, and you know, if your computer, it depends on how powerful your computers are. But basically, if you turn that up, it'll look a lot better to increase the blending steps. And there you go, and click OK. And the other nice thing about this is that all of what I've just shown you, you can save this as a graphic style. Everything that's in the appearance palette can be saved as a graphic style. So if you go under Effect, Stylize now, and add, let's say, a drop shadow, okay, I don't really want one, but let's just say, then it has added it here. Do you see in the appearance palette? So now I've got the 3D effect that I can show and hide, and a drop shadow effect that I can show and hide. If I want to keep this for the next graphic that I'm creating to make sure it's always the same drop shadow, the same angle, the same 3D effect, then all I have to do is go Window, Graphic Styles, open up the Graphic Styles palette, and in here, just have the artwork selected that you like the look of, and then click on the New Graphic Styles button, which is next to it's always there. All these palettes have that in common. The New button is next to the trash can on the bottom right. And then it has saved it, which means if I now want to apply it to this pie chart, click. You see? So it doesn't change the colors because that's manual. That's part of your original artwork. What it does is to any shape that you've got selected, it will add that 3D effect, which of course looks different depending what shape you've got. So, but that way you can ensure that you're always using the same 3D effect on all of your graphics within that one infographic to make it consistent. Okay, so now the last step would just be to put in the data, and of course I don't want to bore you to death doing that, but just think about making nice, elegant connector lines. So when you're typing in your information, take the pen tool and do something like hold down the Shift key to draw straight lines and connect them like this, you know, to the data. You see like a little black line like that, or any color you want. Not too fat, keep them quite thin to make them elegant and not overwhelming. And then you could have, you know, the text here explaining whatever it is you want to explain. Yeah? So you can also use your stroke palette to add beginning and end points to these lines. Go under the window menu, open up the stroke palette, which is where you choose the thickness of the line and and so on. And in there, you've got the option for arrowheads. Hang on, let me just zoom in on that. And what's quite nice is to add a little circle, you know, to the beginning and to the end of those lines. So you can go where it says arrowheads, and instead of choosing one of the arrows, if you scroll down, 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 you'll see that there's little circles, like little empty white circles, or you can also choose a filled circle. And you could do that for the beginning point or for the end point or for both in your artwork. Might be a bit too much to do both, but I just want to show you that it's an option. I probably would have nothing on the left and just do it like that, you see? And once again, that can be saved as part of a graphic style, because in your appearance palette, you see that this line, the stroke effect, is part of what's saved in the appearance. So you can go into your graphic style palette and save that as a line style. Maybe you want it to be a dashed line or a dotted line, whatever it is, save it, and that means the next time I draw a line, any line, or if it's a straight line or if it's a curved line, you can then go and choose that style in the graphic style library, you see, and it'll give it the same little dot at the start and at the end that you've given it, or whatever else it is that you've chosen. Okay, I forgot to mention that underneath the little circle that you can choose for the end point, you can also scale it up or down, make it a lot larger or a lot smaller. So I can make it, let me exaggerate it so you can see it. You see that's a 200% little dot, looks pretty awful. Or you can make it more subtle and reduce that. And again, save that as a graphic style, put it into a little document with with your sample artwork, like my sample icons here, and that way you can always copy and paste it over into your next infographic. So that's demo 1, how to make more interesting pie charts, either just plain, you know, flat ones like so, or with a slight 3D effect. Any questions? No? So far so good. Next one. Let's go a little bit more exciting. In the book Information is Beautiful, and in a few other infographic books that are out there at the moment, you will see this type of treatment, you see, where your data, like let's say it's percentage points, you see that little red one, that's 8%, the one above it is 12% or 17%, or it might be percentage points, or it might indicate how many people out of, it has to be something out of like 10 people out of 100 people, or, you know, whenever you've got a definitive comparison going on. So that's an alternative to your pie chart, right? And you can use that as a very interesting way, but how did they do it? So that's the next thing I want to show you. How are we doing with time? Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh, okay. I need another hour. Okay, so it's brushes, basically. It's using brushes, but in a creative way. You know that you've got the brush palette under Window, Brushes, right? Let me just clean up a bit here because it's gotten messy. Okay. Now, brushes are basically that, oh, I've already got the, Brushes are basically there so that when, you know, you draw something with any, the pen tool, whatever, you can then go and apply an interesting effect by clicking on one of these. An art brush is a brush that stretches itself along the path. So whatever design you've made, it stretches itself along the entirety of the path that you've drawn. So we're going to be creating art brushes for this. Now, how do you figure out the numerics? Here's what you do. I'm going to draw a rectangle, okay? This is going to be my brush. I'm going to turn this into a brush later, okay? So, but I'm going to use, oh, hang on. My bar up here is cut off, so I don't have my width and my height available. I have to open up my transform palette for this. You know, normally on the top control bar, you get the option to see the width and the height. So I have to use the transform palette to type in. This is really important. You need to start off with something that's 100. Either 100 pixels, the width of the bar that I'm drawing. Because that's how I'm going to now measure my 80%, my 60%, my 70%. I start off with 100. Okay, so this is 100 mil wide now, this bar. I'm going to give it a gray color. Okay, like so. Okay, there we go. To be fair, we did start late, so that's why I'm feeling the pressure more. And now I'm going to, so that's my 100% brush, okay? Now I'm going to create one that is, let's say, 90%. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this artwork, Command C, and I'm going to paste in front, meaning put an exact copy of the artwork right in front of itself. So you can't see that I've done it because it's exactly like a duplicate on top of itself. That one I'm going to go and change to 90 to indicate 90%. Okay, so in my width, in my transform palette, you see up here, I'm going to type 90. But before I do that, I need to change the reference point. If I now type in 90, what it will do is it'll reduce it from the left and from the right. You see here from both sides. I don't want that. I want it to only reduce it. This will make sense in a minute. As soon as you see my brush, it'll make sense. Reduce it to 90, but from the left-hand corner, not from both sides. So I click on my reference point. You see that little drawing, sample drawing here that shows you where the transformation is taking place from. And then I'm going to make that 90. Okay, here we go. And I can go and choose a nice color for this. Where are my swatches? Where's my swatch palette gone? Oh, here it is. Okay. I should have created a nice... Again, you can already create the colors in advance to save time. Okay, so that is 90%. I'm just going to do this one more time. I'm not going to do 10 brushes because of the time constraint. But I'm going to duplicate that whole thing, Alt-drag. Select the gray and the blue bar, and Alt-drag, make a copy. Now I'm going to select that. You see it still says 90 mil, the blue bar, and make it 80 to make an 80% bar. Okay? There we go. That's my 80%. Now in a second I'll show you how that actually becomes relevant and turns into what you see back there. One more. Let's do one more just for otherwise. So Alt-drag to make a duplicate and make this one, let's say 50. Okay, so that's 50%. So I'm making it 50 mil. So because of the law of proportion, when you go and turn that into a brush, when it stretches, it doesn't matter that it's stretching because it'll keep the same proportions intact, and so it will still be using the same numeric values and the same relationship. So I'm going to turn this into a brush now. I'm going to go and open up my brush palette, which should already be open. Okay, and I'm going to select this one here. Oops, but I need to select both the gray and the blue bar, the two on top of each other. No need to group them, and just drag them into the brush palette till a plus symbol appears. And I'm going to call it an art brush. From my choices, I choose art brush. Click OK. You don't need to do anything in here. You might want to type in what it is, like 90%, so that you know what you're doing, like what reference this is. Ignore the other ones. These were from a previous demo. So this is my new one here. You see the one on the bottom. I'm going to do the same thing with this brush here. Select, drag into the brush palette, and turn it into an art brush. Click OK, and this one I think was my 80%. And last but not least, click and drag, and this one here was my art brush 50%. Okay. Here I go. Now I'm going to just show you on one circle what happens. If I draw a circle, an ellipse now, or hold down the shift key to make it a perfect circle, and I now go and apply my brush. Wait, I don't want to fill color. Sorry, just a stroke. This is my 90%, my 80%, my 50%. So there you have it. And this is how, when you draw a bunch of circles that go one into the other, going smaller towards the center, like over here, you can have it show the different percentages. Now, just to quickly do that, I'm going to select the circle tool. I'm going to draw a circle, and then I'm going to use my scale tool to make a smaller circle that is right in the center of it. So I select my circle, I double click, I scale it down to, let's say, 70%. Okay, and that's my preview. But I don't say OK, because that will just make this one 70% smaller, and that's that. I'm going to say copy, so it's giving me a copy of the original. And to repeat that, I don't need to do the whole thing again. I just go Command D, which is transform again, which does the last transformation, whatever you've done, rotate, scale, again. Command D. And maybe one more time. How many brushes have I got? I don't know. Actually, no, I only have 3 brushes, so twice is OK. Select the first circle. Select the second circle. Oh no, there's clapping next door. Pressure. Anyway, there you go. This is how it's done. Okay. So that's the idea of creating these brushes, except for the fact that they're gray. The reason they're gray is because I made the background gray. So you can do exactly the same thing with brushes that have no fill for the one that, but you must keep that. Do you understand how important? You can't do it without that background one, because that's what determines the full width that is, circling around. So you have to keep that in your selection when you're making your art brushes. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And yeah, here you go. So you see, so now there's no color. I'm just going to do it to this one here just to show you, so you can do it with a transparency as well. It doesn't have to have a color. Okay? So that's how you create these brushes, except for one more thing. they fade. These ones here fade. You can create very nice effects without this fade thing, but let me just show you the fade thing. It's not as easy as you think. Most of you are probably now going, oh, just add a gradient. Annoyingly enough, gradients are not supported by brushes. Maybe next year when I come to demo, this will work, but for now, it tells me that it cannot turn a gradient into an art brush. So what you have to do is use the blend tool, okay? Just delete this. Hang on. So to use the blend tool, what you do is you draw a little box at the beginning and a little box at the end. I mean, it will help to have measurements, you know, or just make a duplicate. So if I'm just going to copy this. Oops, sorry. I'm trying to rush it now because I know the time's ticking. So I'm going to copy this blue bar and paste it on top of itself again with paste in front. And I'm going to shorten it and make it white. Okay. So that's where that's the beginning, that's the end point of my gradient. And I'm going to make this one here, the blue one, shorter like so. So basically what I now have is I have a little blue box and a little white box at the beginning and at the end of my percentage bar. This is my 80%. And the blend tool will put in an effect that looks like a gradient, but it is something that can be read by the brush palette for some reason. So click on the blend tool, which is on the toolbar. You see here, that tool there. And all you need to do is click on the first piece of artwork, the little blue square, and then click on the next piece, the white one, and it puts in these steps for you and turns it into a blend that looks like a gradient, but really what it is hundreds and hundreds of shapes that look the same in terms of their color, okay, in terms of their just getting lighter and lighter so that they're blending. And with that, I've got the effect of the brush that I want, and so I can go and click and drag that into the brush tool, brush palette, turn it into an art brush, click OK, there it is. Always remember, I didn't write down the numbers now, and so you really have to name these brushes 80%, 100%, otherwise you'll end up in a real muddle. And now, just to show you how this looks, you see, there it is. Okay. Now, there's one more piece of good news. You're probably thinking now, oh, if I want hundreds of colors, I have to do the same exact thing 100 times over, like hundreds of brushes. In your brush pad, hang on, let me just change this, because you know, if you look here, you cannot change the stroke color of this, right? The stroke color is determined by the color of the brush at the moment, which is blue. So what if I want to change it to green, red, whatever? It doesn't let me at the moment, but I'm going to double click on the brush so that the brush pops up, and in here I'm going to turn the colorization method from none to tints and shades. And tints and shades lets you replace the color with whatever color you choose in your foreground, you see? Whatever stroke color you choose there. So it's basically tinting. U-shift makes it like a solid color without any tints. So tints and shades allows for it to also go and diminish and fade. So now if I do that, it doesn't matter that the brush was originally blue. So my original brush was blue, but any color I now choose, any stroke color I now choose, I can, it will do for me based on that, you see? So it saves a lot of time. You can also change the stroke thickness because it's a brush, right? So if you want it to be very thin, make it really thin. If you want it to be really fat, see? And it can be used for timelines. This brush is very useful if I now want to go, you know, create a timeline on a, you know, from 1990 till the year 2000, and I just draw a nice swirly line like so, like a curve, and I want some dates and times to happen along there. There you go, you see? So you can create timelines that way too. So it's not just for this kind of a effect. It is also for, it's not just for these circular drawings, it's also for timelines and other things like that. When you save the document, it saves the brushes with that particular document, and you can then go and load brushes from a different document by going and opening brush libraries and choosing other library and importing it from a different document. So that's demo number 2. I have a third one, but I don't know if I have time. Who's in charge? No one? Do you still have the head, or are you all completely full now? I'll go on until somebody stops me, because you're all, okay? Any questions until, yeah? No? No? Okay. the last one I wanted to show you is this amazing cover from Information is Beautiful. When people always go, how did they do it? I'm not going to talk to you about the data because the data is insane. To create this color wheel where you show the different moods from the different, like which color is associated with which culture, like, you know, what does red mean in Japanese culture versus, you know, in African culture. That is a whole spreadsheet that looks like this. By the way, Information is Beautiful, the website. You can get a lot of their data. If you want to learn what data, this is a little excerpt from the Excel spreadsheet that was used. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to make that into something that you can work with. So you as an artist will then sit there and literally, you know, have to use that Excel data manually imported. There's no other way to do that. But that's a whole different class in itself. I'm going to give you the technical breakdown of this, or as far as I get before they stop me and tell me to shut up because it's party time. Okay, so step one is you have to count how many circles. Basically, what these are, it's basically a bunch of circles inside of each other. Like in this case, it's 88 circles that are going, you know, no, actually, sorry, not 88 circles. It's the divider lines. You see the categories 15, 16, 17, 18. So I counted already that there's 84 of those. And I added another 4 because of the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You see, I need some space here and here for the alphabetical. And then I need need circular dividers for the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, yeah, those rows. So I've already counted that if I want to copy this exact design, of course your data might be different, I need 88 dividers, which are called concentric dividers, and I need 16 circular dividers. And for that, I'm going to use the good old spiral, which is, it's called the polar grid tool, okay? So you've got your line tool, the little diagonal line, and at the very bottom of it is the polar grid tool, which you might have looked at and said, who would use that and why would I use that? But actually, there's a lot of usages for this. And I'm going to quickly go and use that to draw a shape just to show you. You see, this is what the polar grid tool looks like, but I can use my up arrow to add circles, my down arrow to remove circles, my right arrow to add the divider lines, and my left arrow to take them away. So the only thing is I don't want to sit here and count 88 lines, like tilting my head and counting. So rather than doing it visually, I'm going to select the polar grid tool and just click on my page, because that pops up the polar grid's options dialog box, and I can type in exactly what I want. And I figured already out, I told you I did the maths before, because otherwise this course would really run over time. So I know that I want, what did I say? 88 concentric dividers, the lines, and bless you, and 16 radial dividers, okay? Oh, that doesn't make sense. I've done it the wrong way around. Concentric is oh gosh, I've reversed my, sorry guys, it's the other way around. It's 16 concentric. Concentric is a circle. Wow, that's so bizarre. Okay, there's no preview button, by the way. That's one of the problems on this thing, so you can't actually see what you're doing. Is that right now? Yes, that's right now. Okay, sorry. So 130 width, 130 height, just because I figured out that that makes sense in terms of my sheet. And here we go, this is what I wanted. This is the framework, basically, of these divider lines, okay? So I can then I'll put a circle here to hide the middle bits. We can then deal with that later, you know, in terms of hiding them later properly. For now, I can just do something like that to hide it, okay? But that's the idea. And because we're pressed for time, I just want to show you quickly how to take something like the numbers, and I can make this all white, or I can hide the divider line. So I can go under the object menu and ungroup this. When I ungroup it, the polar grid tool is interesting, because when you ungroup, it still keeps two groups. The circles are one group, and the lines are another group. And then you can ungroup a second time to ungroup those from each other. But by ungrouping that, I can take the divider lines and make them invisible if I wanted to. Or the other way around, make the circles invisible, which is what our artwork is all about, right? There. Like so, okay? But I'm going to keep them both. I just wanted to show you that you can do that because eventually we will hide them and replace them with color. To get the numbers going around, I type in a number. I'm going to do this down here just to show you quickly. If you have any object, like let's say I want to draw a quick flower, which also is something that's, the cover of information is beautiful. There's a big flower behind this design. If I just draw a quick flower petal, and I want to quickly rotate it around, like lots and lots of flower petals again and again and again, repeat it. The trick is to use, we're almost done guys, the rotation tool. The rotation tool, when you click on the rotate, it's the rotate tool, you click on it and you just drag the shape around. That's not what I want. I want to actually type in an angle and tell it to rotate, not around its own center, but around, you see where my cursor is? I want it to rotate around that invisible center point. And I'm going to use that same technique to rotate the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around that circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the flower petal, okay? I'm going to click on the rotate tool, and to make sure that that points, so select the petal, click on the rotate tool, put your cursor where you want the center point to be, so somewhere around here. Hold down the Alt key and click. Alt click does two things. It fixes that center point where I dragged it, you see, in the background, very faint, and it pops up the rotate dialog box, and I can now type in something like 20 degrees to give it a 20 degrees offset. And there you go, that's the preview of a 20-degree offset for the flower. And, or maybe make it 10 degrees to make it more interesting. And instead of saying OK, which again will do that to that flower petal, I say copy. And there you go, you've got a copied petal at 20 degrees or 10 degrees. And then I'm going to go and transform again, the same thing I did earlier with scaling, because it remembers the last transformation, Command D. So that's how you can create a very quick flower, for example, okay? And the same technique you use for the numbers. So you just type in the number 1. You have to figure out the right font size, the right positioning. I'm going to have to delete that outer circle because the number sits in there. So I'm deleting the outer circle. I'm putting in a tiny little number 1. Oh, no. It wanted to write it on. It should be around 8 point in size, I would say, to work properly, but you need to figure it out depending on your artwork. Oh, that's really small. Okay, and now I position it where I want it. Okay, you should do this on a separate layer because it'll be hard to afterwards select it if you don't. So really, ideally, if I had more time, I would have done this properly. It's best to have a new layer for your text and put all your text on there so you can easily afterwards manipulate. So I'm just going to cut. Okay, so it's now, I've just copied and pasted that number. I select the number, do you see it's selected? I click on the rotate tool. I put the rotate tool cursor right in the center of my circle. I alt click, which sets that as the center point of my rotation. And I have to figure out the rotation angle. Sorry, but there's a bit of maths involved. I already figured it out before the session because you have to figure out the 88 dividers, right? And how a circle is 360 degrees, right? So you want 88 numbers going around perfectly in that circle, so you need to take 360 divided by 88. The answer is 4.099.000, whatever. So that is my rotation angle. I select the number, I click on the rotate tool, I put the cursor right in the center, I hold down Alt click, I type in 4.09, and I say copy, not OK, because OK will just move that number 1. I want to copy it, copy. And then it's Command D, Command D, Command D. Hang on. Let me just prove that this is working. See? Whee! Sorry. This is my happy sounds that I make when I'm at home working. Whee! And then, unfortunately, the rest you have to type in the numbers yourself. You have to go with the type tool, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But hey. Okay, and I think I don't need to demo how to put in the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You just type in A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You know what I mean for this category here. The very last thing so that you can go home or party or whatever. How on earth are they getting those colors in, right? So at the moment, our artwork, hang on, yeah. Our artwork doesn't consist of shapes that are fillable, right? So these are lines, circles and lines, but the Live Paint tool recognizes overlapping shapes and lets you colorize them. So let me just show you on a simple shape because it makes more sense if I show it to you on this. We've got here 3 circles. Oh, hang on, this will make sense in a second. And then you'll see how this is done. A few of you might already know where I'm going with this. So you've got 3 circles and they're not split in any way at the moment. But then if you use the Live Paint tool, which is on the toolbar. Now I'm losing it, so I'm trying to remember where it is. Ah, yes, it's underneath the shape builder. Okay, so you know the shape builder which I showed you earlier for cutting out holes and stuff. There's the Live Paint bucket. You click on it, you hover over a shape. It says, you know, I've selected the 3 shapes, and when I now go and click, it is putting a color into that area. It recognizes each overlapping area as if it was its own. And then if I go and click on the color that I want, it lets me choose that color from the swatch palette. Even better, I can use my arrows and jump through the colors with my arrow keys. So you see how it shows a little preview of the color it's about to use, and it travels through the swatch palette bit by bit. And then you can go and recolor each area separately, and you can always go back and recolor it again. Keep the original, before you do this, keep the original safe, because once it's a Live Paint bucket group, it is very hard to get back to the original circles, if not impossible. So I would go and keep the original safe somewhere, copy and paste it somewhere. But then I go and select my circles and my concentric divider lines. And it doesn't even matter if the concentric circles are hidden. Like if you've taken away the stroke so that you can't actually see them, it doesn't matter, because when you select the artwork, it still reads them as paths. So you select the circles and the lines from the polar grid. You click on the, you select the Live Paint Buckets tool, and it would have been nice to already have a color group ready, okay? But I haven't done it, but I'm just going to use that color group here, and I'm going to choose red. Click, 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 that's my red. Of course, I should sit there with an Excel sheet and figure out which column should be what, but I'm just showing you the idea of this, okay? There you go, and then you travel through and you choose the blue, and you travel through and choose the yellow. It takes so much time purely because of this data business. Then again, is anybody really going to analyze it and make sure that, well, it's more of a this kind of thing is more of a visual. But that's the idea. So that's a very quick intro of how to create this, but it's pretty much done. I mean, it's not done, but the framework is there. Yeah? So, another graphic demystified. Questions? No? Okay, so that's all we had time for. So we started off with a basic pie chart, then we moved on to these brushes, and explore the brushes because there's so much cool stuff you can do with brushes. And finally, creating this, this effect here from Information is Beautiful cover. And just keep learning and exploring, and just try things out because there's so much exciting stuff hidden away in those tools. All right? Good luck.